Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for an Awake Security webinar titled Responding to Ransomware, Containing the Threat and Preventing Encryption. Just in 2020, ransomware is believed to have affected 51% of businesses with an average ransom of about $178,000. Collectively, this has resulted in billions of dollars in losses from the economy as a whole. Clearly every organization needs to do a better job of detecting ransomware attacks as quickly as possible and responding effectively. But our experience responding to ransomware breaches shows that prepping ahead of time for ransomware can significantly alter the outcome, even if the attack is not entirely prevented. We're joined today by Jason Beavis, Vice President of Awake Labs. Jason leads a team of incident responders and threat hunters who have helped customers recover from some of the world's most consequential breaches, whether those came from nation-state attacks, ransomware, other destructive malware. Today, he will be sharing insights on prevention and remediation aspects of a ransomware defense strategy, with the goal being to prevent encryption and exfiltration. Just a quick note, this is actually a companion webinar to one Jason did in August on detecting the early warning signs of ransomware. If you haven't watched that one yet, I'll post a link in the chat window and encourage you to take a look at that as well, maybe after this one's done. If you have questions or technical difficulties, please use the Q&A in the chat feature in Zoom. But without further ado, Jason, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Rudy. And really appreciate and want to thank everyone for coming and taking out an hour of your time to sit with us today. I'll try to keep everything interesting and also provide as many relevant, tactics to help you in the field. We're going to go ahead and jump right in because I've got quite a few items to go through. For those of you that can see the menu, we're going to just go through a quick kind of company introduction so everyone knows who we are. I'll go through some of the different pieces to understand the ransomware sort of progression of an attack. We'll talk about a case study, and then we'll spend the rest of the time really kind of going deep into some of the things you can do either during an incident or prior to really get yourself in a good situation to mitigate the impact. And, we've got a few real life stories of how we were actually able to kind of stop, an encryption, getting ahead of it at many aspects. And then we'll have a little bit of time for question and answer. So as I jump in, for those of you who don't know me, again, you can follow me on Twitter if you want there, but I've been in the industry about 20-something years. You can see the companies up there that I've worked for. And spent quite a bit of time, being very hands-on and at the management levels. I do a lot of side projects with stuff and spend a lot of my free time researching ransomware at different levels. So, with the ado, I'll go ahead and jump in and we'll give you a quick overview of the company, and then we'll dive right into the details. So for those of you who maybe were not aware, Awake got purchased by Arista Networks in October. And Awake was a company, built by security experts for security. And now we're part of a larger team, and it's been a great experience coming over to Arista. It really does kind of solidify us as, doubling down somewhat in the network space of security, as well as brings us out to a lot of different opportunities we had. And, we've got a great team here on both sides. And, there's some complementary stuff on security with the Arista side. But overall, I think you'll continue to see us grow in the security field. And we'll do more and more stuff like this that shows how well we are, combining some of the core sets of network items into our solutions as we move forward. So with that, I'll go ahead and jump in. And how I want to start today is to just kind of walk through very simple, some of the fundamental things we see, when you look at the kind of the kill chain and how ransomware is usually looked at from an attacker's perspective. And, if you saw one of the companies I worked at in the past, they did a lot of offensive stuff. And, we understood exactly how we came into companies. And I'm sure all you red teamers out there, you really have a pretty good idea of this. But, these actors, what they do is they're going to look outside at a lot of your data, and they're going to harvest it. And for those of you who do research, on the dark net, you can purchase records pretty cheap to get some of this data. And then obviously you've got all the exploits that are out there these days. Primarily, if you look, you've had Cisco devices, you've had NetScalers, with lots of vulnerabilities in them. And these have opened up the avenue for different types of tactics. But when we break that down, it sort of breaks down to three different items. It's phishing, and we see the big phishing campaigns, like with Ryuk, we saw the Keg Tap campaign, and even before Keg Tap was somewhat published widely, if you knew how to hunt through virus total, you could find remnants of what was called Keg Tap phishing campaign under there. And you've got these big phishing campaigns that go out and are broad, hit a lot of different individuals. You've obviously got the brute force, and for anybody who's monitoring, you see that stuff going on all the time. It's not just RDP, but there's other brute forcing that goes on constantly by some of these actors. And then you've also now got, a lot of equipment on the outside that has, exposed CVE exploits that, with things that are being weaponized or, code being built to get into them fairly quickly. So, and the attackers are getting better and better at this as they sort of run business models specifically for this task. We also see a lot of, legit tool abuse and legit credential, which makes it hard for some of the endpoint technology sometimes to pick this up. EDR is fundamental to containment and investigation and things like that on the endpoint. But what we also do know, like any technology can be bypassed at some level. And, that's a fundamental thing the attackers are always trying to keep up on and get behind those technologies so that they can, really avoid the detection. And at the end, it's kind of game over when you get to the point of exfiltration, decryption, and then if your payment's posted, it's beyond game over. You're into significant impact. So we all know this probably. It's pretty common. I wanted to break it down in a simple way because what we want to talk about is sort of, okay, so what does that mean? And as we look at items, you're going to see there's different deficiencies we run into. So for example, if you look at the phishing, brute force, and vulnerability, you've got usually technology control deficiencies at some level that are being bypassed, or the hygiene of the solution is not in good shape. In addition to that, you've got now these unmanaged items or shadow IT, and we'll talk about not necessarily shadow IT entirely in the way a lot of people think about it, but we'll talk about servers that just don't have coverage, get popped in the middle of an incident. So they get compromised because you thought you had technology deployed and you didn't, but you have that. And then you're now seeing compromises sort of migrate into the cloud at some level. On the exfiltration side, and we're going to talk a lot about this, the Active Directory is, really what's targeted. If you do research, you're going to see, they know the percentage of organizations that the majority of their networks are running AD and stuff. So there's a lot of pieces there that can be used to quickly shut down and contain and stop the spread. And we're going to go in a lot of depth about that. You've got segmentation. If you've ever been compromised, you've likely been through setup infrastructure, it gets re-compromised, you're trying to figure it out. You're trying to figure out the right strategy. And we're going to talk about not only segmentation, but cutting off some of the paths through Active Directory as a way to also monitor who's violating some of those paths. And then, your backup and restoration. It's amazing to see the flaws in this. Everyone believes cloud backup is great. It is, but have you ever tried restoring it when half your infrastructure is down? And how do you deal with that? And, those are things that we've ran into in the field where everyone believes we have a good backup set up in the cloud, and then you struggle to get those backups back into the environment when you need them. And then, just overall, what is the strategy? How well is it being implemented? As well as you've got all these external exposures through the initial recon that are still sometimes hitting you as a second or third stage. Maybe the same actor, maybe a different actor coming at you and trying to also abuse these things. So again, really trying to help everyone understand the progression and the key defenses. And we're going to talk to a lot of these items in yellow as we go through the deck. Let's dive into the case study. This is an example of Ryuk, and I don't necessarily want to belabor the graphic on the right. Everyone's probably seen that out on the postings. And, my point here is to kind of go through an example where, we were on the ground and, we had a potential impact where, we already knew TrickBot was in the environment, and we were expecting in about 2-3 days the encryption to hit. And as a result, we had to put in place several items to essentially stop the encryption. Okay. And also, try to keep the business running as much as we could at the same time, and mitigate any damage and costs we could. And as you know today, right, being 2 hours of ransom, my point with this piece in here is, we had 2 or 3 days to get ahead of it. These days, that shortly after that time zone went down quite a bit, from 2 to 3 days to possibly hours in some of these cases. So, you don't have the luxury of essentially calling your incident response vendor to come in and try to stop the attack from your initial infection, if it's happening in that quick of a time. And we had the luxury of doing it days ahead. So I'm trying to give you some of those strategies that we use when you see the compromise, because you're going to have to act likely without pulling your IR vendor in, to help kind of stop it and stop the mitigation of it. So in the end, we came out, no encryption of any critical asset. We had some minor business outages. Some of those were caused by us, essentially, locking down things to avoid it. And then, minor financial impact. A lot of that was some of the resources working overtime, as well as us, to get the environment shored up, but nothing in terms of breach data leakage, any of that. In the end, you had a much more hardened environment for Active Directory. Have great understanding of the open source components that are out there in your sort of attack surface is exposed to. And then, some different strategies for segmentation, backup. Does your two-factor authentication even work, when you shut it down? Some of those things came into play. So, again, this was a very successful item where we did a great deal of mitigating the Ryuk case. And I'm going to go back and forth through Ryuk and some of the others, but these strategies apply to just about every ransomware vendor out there. And I do know TrickBot is now at the firmware BIOS level, based on things I read recently. And, I'm not addressing any of that in here at this point in time, but, we'll go through, even scenarios that will likely help avoid that, because we're not specifically targeting that. We're targeting things around that will help secure the infrastructure. So in the end, we defended the threat where others, would have paid millions of dollars to try to defend this type of threat. And this is not Ryuk, by the way. This is actually Reveal. And, we'll talk about some of the mixture between Reveal, Ryuk, these different actors as we go through, and how we're picking that up. But, the key here is saving yourself from the OFAC regulations, which we'll talk about, saving yourself from, getting into massive insurance coverage, saving yourself from the sort of embarrassment of leaking and having to contact, thousands of people, millions of people, however big your organization is, from the breach. So we're going to start with the Active Directory, and you all can feel free to read this. I'm going to go into a lot of these in depth, but sometimes I'll ask these as questions, and others I'll just post them on screen. But I think one of the amazing things I've still seen today is there's a significant lack of sort of understanding how the AD structure works in a lot of orgs, especially ones that are being hit with ransomware today. And it might be manpower, or human resources, essentially, that you don't have the right staff in there dealing with it. Maybe you got hygiene sort of out of control. And even today I saw I think it was Dark Reading, there's a post of like, I'd pay for hygiene over, some point solutions every day. And I'll tell you, a lot of what we're going to talk about is hygiene, and also quick response actions that can shut down items. Knowing how the ransomware can spread in the organization, you're one of the things when I came to Awake, we do stuff over the product, and, the product gives you alerts and stuff like that, but it doesn't necessarily alert on, what your file share infrastructure looks like. It's not something that you want to essentially alert on it in some sense. However, we also look at it, and I'll explain some ways we do that, so that I can understand, okay, I see how all the hosts communicate, and that's exactly how, when you drop, Conti on a file share, it's going to replicate down, and it's going to go across everybody who's connected to that. And, those are things that if you don't understand from the AD side, there's ways you can do that through AD and also the network, and we'll talk to that. But again, really having a good understanding of this, if you don't have people on your AD structure that understand PowerShell, my recommendation is hire some of your people involved in response who can run PowerShell. It is going to be fundamental to containment and aspects of quick containment, as well as assessing whether that containment's been implemented at some level. And, the other things on here are pretty common: scheduled tasks. App blocker we know is difficult to implement, but you're going to find it comes in fairly effective to shut down things, as it is hard to implement because it kills things. However, it also kills the spread of ransomware at some level. And, this is just a basic sort of question and mindset here. There's a lot more, and I'm going to point you to some of those resources so that, you can look up and dig into them, and we'll cover a good portion of them as we go through. So let's start with a couple of things. So trust. Most infrastructures have some level of trust in them today. And, one of the first things you're going to want to do when you realize there's a potential encryption or an initial encryption is you want to make sure your IR plans understand what trusts are in place and, what happens when you drop them. And what's the impact of that to the organization. So trust become a key thing of stopping the replication from environment to environment. So if you've got a multi-trust environment and you've got a breakout in one at any level, one of the first things you're going to want to do is just crush and kill those trusts across the board. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But you want to make sure, as much as it's a disruption, if you can go through those type of tests before to see what they actually break, that's going to be fundamentally something from being encrypted in one environment to encrypting the entire organization if they get across the trust. Password weakness is nothing new. In fact, I'm just amazed. This is the biggest challenge in security and has been since day one. I think about 10 or 12 years ago, I wrote a blog about passwords and patches, or enemy number 1 and 2. And I can tell you, passwords are still enemy number 1. The funny thing here is these links I'm giving you. I laugh because it's the best gift a 6-year-old could get. A 6-year-old fix can give you. I mean, these are fixes that have been out there since 2014. Yet we still run into organization after organization that have not implemented these items. So at what point does it become your responsibility to catch up with the security controls? If you look at these 2 links on here and you're able to go in and understand how to disable the W digest, the credential LSA, I mean, these are things that your passwords are stored in memory. They're able to be taken out. Your passwords are communicated across the Kerberos and they're able to be ripped out. Mimikatz has multiple ways of doing this. We know a lot of the actors use that. If they're on the systems, they can dump them. That's how they're able to continue to spread. So you want to stop that spread. You also want to stop the escalation. One of the things that I didn't put in the slides, but I'll talk about is, your service accounts. You likely don't change them. You probably have ones that are multiple years old. We usually try to tell you to get around, 120, days, something like that for them. Maybe a little more than that, 180 is a good practice. But the other thing is we usually want you to have the passwords at between 25 and 35 characters, so they're very hard to crack. Now, that's great practice, but if you've got all these things enabled and you do have that complexity in those service accounts in place, the challenge is they can just pull those accounts from memory. So all that work you did to implement a complex structure for service accounts, you just sort of made it null and void without these basic functions at the password level. So again, 6 years old, everyone, go back, look at this, look at your organization. You should be able to run with this stuff turned on. It's been out there enough. Most organizations can turn it on full time. If you don't have it on, you end up getting hit. You can also turn these on fairly quickly. Some of the first stages as you're coming in, and you want to get them rolled out fairly quickly because it may stop spread through privileged access and getting to other functions in the network that they maybe haven't encrypted yet because they don't have access to these actors. Let's go into egress traffic. So, one of the things we want to do, especially if we catch them early enough, is we want to stop the egress of traffic. And again, this is a sort of a prevention step, as well as how can I contain and possibly disrupt their exfiltration. So we want to make it as difficult as possible. And what that means is, at some point you probably built out your server infrastructure. You might have opened up different ports for them to communicate in different ways. You typically want to lock that down, and you want to lock it down at the server level as well as the firewall. out of the organization, there's likely no reason why every server should be talking out on DNS, every server should be talking out on NTP, every server should be talking out FTP. Those are bad practices. There's ways to centralize that communication and not allow the actors to use individual servers for that type of function, as well as set their tunnels up, and their C2 out of those servers. So you want to look at how do you block that egress. In the event of an actual incident, you may even get more restrictive than that, and it's possible you may end up dropping all the traffic if you really, really needed to and you had the encryption going out. But in general, you want to kind of look at the hygiene, lock it down as much as possible. And if you can't do it now, make sure you get it into your plan that's one of your steps, is to sort of lock down server traffic beaconing out. And I mean, that's if they're on the servers and they need to get C2 and exfiltration out, you can quickly disrupt it if you can get a hold of these and start shutting it down. And you can push through policy to do local firewalls as well as the gateway devices. You can shut it down there. When we look at shares, this is how you're sort of communicating across the board. One thing that's interesting we see at the network layer, we usually find a lot of, let's call it, interesting scripts, PII, things like that at the network level when we watch what goes across shares and SMB and DC, RPC. But the other thing, shares sometimes you can shut them down entirely. I've seen orgs that they run everything out of products like SharePoint and stuff like that, and I'm sure there might be ransomware that encrypts through things like that at different levels, but it's a different effect. It doesn't have the same impact. So you can migrate certain data off of shares, but anywhere you don't need certain shares, especially workstation to workstation, you should be shutting down that lateral movement. Also looking at your file share infrastructure. And again, this is not something you can necessarily go implement today after leaving this call, but what you want to do is get into your plan of, if you've got an outbreak somewhere, you want to know which key file share servers are out there, how many hosts do they hit, and, have a strategy for going in and essentially shutting down, admin C and IPC shares, because that will immediately possibly stop the replication to a large amount of hosts. Yes, it will break things, but you can break things or you can get encrypted. And I can tell you the cost of getting encrypted is 10x of that, of breaking it for a short period of time, containing the incident, getting root cause, and then turning you back up. It's going to be a lot less expensive on every avenue. And again, it's just a quick strategy to make sure you're addressing the spread of the threat when it comes in. If we look at a couple other things, so it's one of the things we ran into, and we sort of got lucky at some level here, where the actors know your enterprise just as well, if not better than you. So you likely have software distribution for patching and all that. And, there's always questions of, well, I can't pull that off, but I use it to patch, and yeah, that's great. But I can tell you a lot of the actors will run a scheduled task with a Cobalt Strike beacon with a timed event right to your, SMS server or, whatever it is. And they're going to try to leverage that to encrypt your entire environment as one of the tactics. So, one of the things we've talked about with individuals as well, maybe you should separate some of your critical infrastructure from some of your workstations and things like that, to at least, have some mitigation from a prevention strategy at the software distribution layer. The other thing is you got to make sure your plans have capability to rip this infrastructure down really quick. I can tell you, we've been in use cases where we caught the beacons coming across right to it, and we got enough of a log that we immediately were able to shut down. We just shut down the entire infrastructure immediately. It stopped the entire place from being encrypted. Okay, so you got to be able to quickly react at the IR level with that. You got to have enough monitoring in place that can see the potential beacons going across and shut down, but make sure your plans address what it means. And for all of you who think that's painful, I would tell you, ask yourself how hard it is to rebuild from the ground up your software distribution server. And I bet you it's going to take you a lot of time. If you're in anywhere of a complex of an org, it may take you 3 to 4 weeks or longer to rebuild that from ground up. So taking it offline until you clean and shut down and contain is hours, maybe a day, versus maybe a day or two, versus having to rebuild something that got encrypted and you're sort of now struggling to keep up on patches and stuff as you're rebuilding your infrastructure. So again, strong recommendation there to look at that architecture and make sure you're able to shut it down quickly. Sinkholes, these are just basic items that, I know sometimes organizations don't have, and they don't think about how well they come in, but there's always this theory of, do I disrupt the attacker and all that? Okay, we're not dealing with, persistent China in your org who's constantly coming in, and when you block an IP, they entrench, and that, it's different at some level. You're talking with actors that are running a business to make money off of you, and you need to just shut down every piece and disrupt every piece that you can as fast as possible and make their job difficult. Because at some point, the return on money doesn't pay. And at some point, they'll just go back to their regular thing, and they'll shut down this case and move on to the next one that they actually did get into. So as bad things come in, you want to make sure you've got a sinkhole infrastructure. And then the other mistake a lot of people have is you need to make sure that replicates across the board. So again, two ways you can disable the spread as well as disable the C2. And just remember, if your software infrastructure has replication through distribution to everywhere, well, so does the attacker likely if they've got it. Now, when we dive in a little bit more to some of the other AD pieces, PowerShell, again, I mentioned earlier, so I can't stress the key here. So PowerShell during an IR is super important. And honestly, you should have kind of a list you're checking on a regular basis. You should look at your infrastructure, see what needs cleaned up. There's a lot of proactive things you can do in this space, but you've got your groups, you got your privileges. You can see which accounts are stale. All your password stuff you can pull back. All that can be pulled via PowerShell without any question. So it can also be shut down fairly quickly, some of it through PowerShell. When you get hit, you're going to likely create a whole new group for your admins. You're going to move people over there. You're going to start setting up infrastructure with new clean groups and admins on clean domain controllers, things like that. And in the meantime, you're going to try to figure out what you can pull across from the old infrastructure to the new, and you're going to be locking down some of that old infrastructure until you contain it. Again, PowerShell is going to be a quick way that you can get ahead even today, go out, look at some of these things, what do they show me? And again, how many service accounts do I have? How many groups do I have? I'll go into a little bit of some of this, but if you look at sort of scheduled tasks too, you gotta deprivilege these. This again is not new news. Scheduled tasks are always used across the board, yet we still seem to really struggle with what's out there and why is it privileged at a level it shouldn't be. And, some of the key things you want to do is deny the batch job on them for privileged accounts. Group policy can also isolate these completely. And then for those of you who do have SIM and audit logging infrastructure, those are the key logs. You want to turn on the audit logging and you watch the creates and all that through the scheduled tasks over there. So you can start to capture what that is across the infrastructure, who owns it and why. So, the big recommendation here is when you're building out your playbooks in your incident response plan, what's your Active Directory containment steps? How does PowerShell play into that to help, lock down the persistence mechanisms, shut them down quickly, and essentially control, possible privilege issues with scheduled tasks, being able to do things, which again is not always going to be picked up by an EDR or something like that, because it's likely just something that's been running an environment and somebody's already got, controls in those systems at those levels that allow it to happen. Now, the last piece on the AD that I'm really going to talk about, and again, there's a ton more information I could get out there to everybody. I just want to get some of the core things that I think help with the encryption. And, App Locker is, it's a great tool to shut down and disrupt things. The problem is it's a great tool to disrupt your entire business environment too. With that said, there's a couple key things you can do here. App Locker should be, set up using group policy. The key thing to really look at is DLLs in the temp directory. So these are going to be, a lot of these malware components will spin up DLLs in the temp directory, and then, they're going to run. So essentially, if you're having a problem where you're being accessed at multiple levels, it looks like encryption starting to kick off, App Locker will start to just shut down things. If you can implement it before the ransomware, you're gonna have a business disruption, but you're also just going to stop some of the malware from running completely. And then you can go back and figure out how bad you are. Again, being down for hours, that is going to be better than being encrypted and taking you a week or two to get back up and running at full steam. And again, it's going to save you 10x the cost. The one thing I would tell you is today, you can actually look at certain pieces of your network. You can look at what is the effect if I turn on app blocker today? Because part of the challenges you run into if you do get an environment and you have to turn on app blocker, you've now locked down everything and you're still trying to contain the actor at some level. And what happens is now you're starting to get pressure on the outside of these applications are breaking, we can't turn them up, and now you're starting to lose money on the front end. So even though you've now mitigated the ransomware threat, you're now making a decision, do I have to open the infrastructure back up for the business? And, that's sometimes where you get encryption comes back into the environment and you really get stuck at a bad situation because you had to make a business decision to try to make money, and you now open it back up and boom, you basically opened up the encryption. So you can go back now and start testing some of these things. Like I say in here, it will definitely break things. So if you can start testing what would happen if you implemented this, start figuring out how to get your current apps on those whitelists, and that will help you sort of get ahead. So you think of it as sort of a tabletop. If we were going to run through and do a tabletop, shut down this on Active Directory, put app blocker on, what breaks? Now So now you can start, strategically looking at how to fix this, but now you've also gotten a little better at being able to, in a serious outbreak, to shut it down and stop a massive impact. Now, I'm going to shift to the network side, and this is again, we definitely are deeper here than probably just about anybody out there these days. And there's just fundamental things when we're on engagements, either through our managed section or when we drop in the equipment on an IR that we find. And for those of you who you're used to your ransomware responders coming in and dropping endpoint, I can tell you usually after the fact, they'll come back and say they need network. And then you ask them, well, why didn't you drop in network during the ransomware? And I'll answer that question for you. It's pretty easy. One, they didn't have the resources to do it. You typically want to drop in endpoint fast because you can do that. Network sometimes requires a little bit more time, but usually you still want to move them both in parallel. But a lot of the vendors, maybe they don't know network, so they don't know how to drop it in. Two, they may not have the resources to run something. I mean, some of the firms are completely overwhelmed today who can do both. And what happens is they give you what resource they can to run the endpoint. But at the end, they're going to come back and tell you, oh, but you should be running and putting in our network equipment at the end. And the reason why they do that is because they know there's gaps. You have gaps in general. You need to make sure your endpoint's covered, your logging is covered, and then your network. Those three will give you complete visibility on stuff, and every one of them has a gap at some level. So things we've ran into quite often is, did you even get your agents out? I can't tell you how many incidents I've been in, and all of a sudden we find another system gets popped, and everybody's like, what is that system? Where is it? And this is kind of the shadow IT problem. Well, it's not really shadow IT. It was a server that was known and was supposed to be up. We just somehow missed it in the EDR rollout. So now we think we're containing the actor, and next thing you know, we've got a fully encrypted system hitting over somewhere else and getting ready to spread, further out in the environment now that it's completely compromised. So, we want to make sure you understand that, where your agents are and what's covered, what's not covered. And then, you've got the other pieces, we talked about sort of, beacons and things that can come out of the environment. Did you actually really implement the blocks, the DNS sinkholing all correctly? Did you actually implement all your AD stuff? So these are all things that people don't realize you can actually see all this stuff at the network level too. In fact, we spent a lot of time when we went through all the ransomware containment stuff of looking back and saying, well, how much of that can we see at the network level? And we were surprised. We can see quite a bit of it. So when you look at agent communication, and these are just samples, and some of those are the AV product versus the EDR product, and sometimes their domains are changing, and I'm not really calling out those vendors for any reason. But every EDR agent and AV agent usually phones back home at some level, and these are some of the URLs they go to. So if you don't know that in your own infrastructure, I don't know how hard it is to pick up, but from a network level, you can actually see what's covered with the agent, what's not, and you should be making sure you've always got the agent out on the hosts that are supported for it. And then you also should be able to tell what's the difference of what can't be covered. There's certain operating systems, certain types of devices that just won't be covered. And we know that's about 40% of the environment can't be covered by the endpoint out there. You've got, old systems. You still see people running. Somebody mentioned Solaris 9 the other day to me. I don't know if that was real or not, but there's things like that out there that, yeah, they're going to get popped if they're exposed. And, you're not going to get an EDR agent on those boxes in many cases. And then you've also got IoT stuff. We picked up, just the other day, we picked up TVs communicate now. You pick up things out of the conference rooms, communicate now. Backdoor systems we picked up just yesterday, and Grok Tunnel coming out. It has one of these EDR agents on it. We actually picked up some ransomware stuff, had one of these EDR agents on it, wasn't seen by it. So we know, there's gaps in every technology, so we want to make sure we've got things to kind of defense in depth and protect that. And, again, it's just a matter of you want to know what exists in the environment to keep it locked down. Now, just shifting a little, if you kind of look at the C2, there's lots of ways to pick up the C2 through the network. When you start to lock down the servers, start to lock down the firewall, start to put in the DNS sinkhole items, what you're going to find, though, is something didn't get replicated, something got missed, and you're seeing it. And I think the phrase at the bottom here, I put these two phrases as almost the exact same wording to kind of say, I can't tell you how many times the system was compromised with an agent. I can also tell you, I can't tell you how many times the system, wasn't detected by the agent. And it's pretty significant. You see that all the time. The attackers are good. And, the network gives you another way to see uncommon connections coming out that you think you've maybe implemented and locked them out, but they've figured out another path where you just are not aware of it. So, we try to come in with both and make sure we're seeing, if they're able to get out of kind of what we had for EDR coverage in the environment. And, these are just simple examples, on kind of some of the AD stuff. So just about everything I was explaining to you on the AD level, we actually can see it at the network. Most people maybe don't know that. But, if you look at the Maze paper that Rudy was talking about earlier, and you sort of look at that where it says Operation LSA enum trust domain, that's essentially how I know how many trusts are in this environment. And these opnums, as they refer to them, and there's a ton of them mentioned in the Maze paper, they're all ways we can see how the AD structure communicates at the network level. So in this case, I know there's two trusts here. I know the password policy settings across the board. This will be different if you find user accounts, service accounts. So in the network, I'll search for every user that has like SBC or service, or, usually I can see the pattern in what their service accounts are. And then we just grab the traffic, we look at it and we say, okay, our admin passwords, do they change or are they locked down? Do service accounts, what's their length? Do they have complexity? Can we identify them? If we can, then obviously an attacker can. And again, all this stuff, if you're supposed to be disabling the trust, the network can validate all those as well as tell you where somebody maybe set up something that's not following these controls. So, that's the reason why we also drop in, because when we're in containment and remediation, we need to know we're actually locking them out of the environment. So the network provides us essentially all the visibility of how AD is actually being put in control to contain them. So we don't want to leave an open path for anyone to get into. When you look at some of the other pieces, usually you'll go through multiple password resets. Sometimes in an org, you're going to reset the golden tickets. You're going to you go through lots of stuff to change passwords, and it gets frustrating. It gets fun. Users hate you pretty quickly. But one of the things you do first is you try to restrict the privilege account level, and you end up setting up new groups. You put new accounts entirely over there, and you set up reset all the passwords. But one of the things you want to do is you want to watch who keeps trying to log in, because then what happens is you find there's malware trying to log in. You find there's scripts and batch files you didn't know trying to log in when you did that, and you had no idea they existed. So you find both good hygiene, bad hygiene, and you find the actor. And you want to be able to make sure you're seeing, when you do resets, which of these admins are still trying to do things where they shouldn't be in the environment. And again, it's really kind of the phrase has always been out there, the network is the ground truth. It's because we can actually, everything communicates over the network. So we can see whether or not it's actually been turned on correctly or not in many cases if we're looking at it. And, from a ransomware perspective, we spend a lot of time focusing on that over here. I'm going to shift into the OSINT piece now and off the network. We've got, a few more minutes. I want to go through a couple more things, and then we'll open it up for questions. This is sort of maybe the lower priority in the batch, but as you get further down the containment item, it's always important to know, what does the attacker really know about my environment and how they deal with this stuff? And, this is something you could actually check today. You can go in and run sort of attack surface assessment and look at the outside and see what comes, into play. OSINT is, usually one of those things you should be looking at from an attack surface, as well as that AD and, those different pieces that we talked about earlier. But this is one that's completely external to the org. And if you don't really know your exposures or what's, being sold underneath on your company, you're somewhat at a disadvantage, and you're not really looking at it from the outside. I think if you think about back in the day, and this is some of you may or may not get this, but Houdini was a magician that, got himself out of safes. And the reason he was able to do that is no one ever looked at the security of the safe from the inside. They all looked at it from the outside, and he knew that. So he was easily able to get out of it because there were weaknesses from the inside. Right now, most of you are looking at your organization from the inside, or maybe from a basic external scan. But again, you're not looking at it from the weak point that the actors are. I mean, you can go underneath on the dark net and you'll see, they will just sell your accounts for, a couple dollars a piece to get access. It's like $150 to pop any account that you want to pay them for. So, they have ways to get in. Now, the ransomware groups are usually not doing that. They're not buying one account that's acting. They've got lists of accounts. So this is kind of addressing how they come in. So they get a list of emails, and, you can pull these things. There's open source tools out there like the Harvester and that. There's other ways you can pull this. And, you get a list of emails. But in addition, if you can get a list of people, in addition to the emails, you can put the two lists together, figure out the naming convention, and now you've probably got, 50% more users to target than you thought you had. And that's how some of the actors think. And so now they've got more emails to fish. Similarly, if you look at domains and IP addresses, you've now kind of combined the two, looked at them, you've probably got more systems to scan. And then you use those to go look at things you want to typo squat. And, essentially I'll start mimicking those domains in my phishing emails up top. So not only do I have more people to fish, I now know all the domains I can fish you on and make it look like what you have. And again, these are services you can just pay for, a quick way to replicate a phishing site and put it up. And then you obviously got things that are open, and, the actors and researchers are out there scanning you with different tools all the time, looking for open data leaks. And if you're not doing it, I can assure you they are. And at some point, you're going to make a mistake and you're going to have something open. So make sure you're proactive on those items and you know what's actually out there and potentially exposed, and start mitigating and limiting that. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And then, systems plus accounts, that just gives you where your brute force landscape's coming in. Can't tell you how many IRs and time I've been pulled in, and we've tried to say to the person on the call, they say, hey, these accounts are being locked out. We couldn't find any malware. We thought it was nothing. But now 3 days later, we're finding it again. Accounts are being locked out. We need somebody serious to come in and look them out. And we basically say, well, you got something being brute force from the outside. And they're like, no, we've double checked that every time we get in. Configuration issue. It's just outside regular things that go on. And they didn't have a strategy for sinkholing. They didn't have a strategy for blocking. And they actually had something like RDP wide open. In one case, they actually had work from home user, laptop connected directly to physical cable on his router, had RDP open that path. Couldn't see it coming in until we did the investigation. Was locking out the account, and they couldn't figure it out. But again, wasn't even a real attack essentially from that standpoint, or a real incident. It was, somebody just scanning you and you believed it was. So again, that's where they get all these data, and, you got to watch those exposures. And the list on the right there is just an example of everything that they're likely going through. Okay. So you've got 25 or so different sources. You've got the information down below that can be cross-referenced, everything to even add more, make things more specific, make them more targeted when they run these campaigns. And trust me, if you're a business, you're just getting better and better at how you make this stuff get you through the cracks. So there's things you can do on the outside, and we'll talk a tad bit about that. So once you have that data, I'm still amazed how many people don't have what we call an abuse mailbox. And on several ransomware incidents, what we did is tell the organization as we got further down the remediation path, set up an abuse force mailbox. In fact, it was interesting. One of the Ryuk gigs we were in, the second campaign came out, and everybody thought, oh no, they're targeting us again. Yet we saw somebody report it in a totally different country, totally different industry, and it was just another spray of sort of phishing attempt by the ransomware vendor. And but this phishing got in, it's in all the mailboxes, and again, you have people forwarding it around, you have people possibly clicking it. So an abuse mailbox is a way for anything that bypasses your filters. You give employees a way to send that into a security group. So you create abuse at whatever your org is, anything that bypasses your phishing. Again, we talked about every technology has some gap, okay? These actors are doing that on purpose to figure out how to get by them. So when it gets through, make sure it gets to your team. Make sure they put in the right things to block it. But you got to have a funnel for all those bad things that come in. Also, by getting it security, in many cases, we'll put this in at a certain point because we keep losing being able to pull down the malware sometimes, if it didn't actually come down. And if we can get it coming in centrally, we can quickly go pull it down and analyze it and get all the IOCs and everything from it. So your security team can leverage that in the same fashion if they do malware research. And then you can also employ a strategy of ripping these out of the inbox. So your IR plan should have a strategy of essentially, searching through the mailbox for, the names, the files, the subject lines, whatever, and just deleting or disabling those emails from users being able to see them in their inboxes. So that's it should be part of your IR plan. And then, when you did the OSINT, the accounts that are outside. So, when you're doing certain things with privileged users, maybe you should change their accounts internal for what they do so that those accounts that are privileged are not the ones that are outside. So again, you understand the attack service, and, if you need to, you can disable certain things or change them and set up plans to address them, during an incident, or even now you can get ahead of some of this and make it more difficult so that when something comes in, you can deprivilege, you have mechanisms for your staff to get in, you can get the IOCs, you can implement different things that go back up to the AD and the network tier and that to help be more effective. So the last thing I'm going to really talk through is the OFAC. So for those of you who didn't see it a week or two ago, we posted a dark reading. So about a month ago, we wrote a blog and then got it through dark reading to sort of talk to the OFAC regulations, because there was this posting, and essentially OFAC was saying, you need to build in a structure to assume you may violate their guidelines, and you may have to pay them fines because you paid the ransomware payment. So there's a big discouragement against paying the ransomware right now, because it just encourages the actors to do it. And, be it as you will, sometimes you may pay it, you may not. And, there's functions that help you with that. Sometimes you don't really know what you can do. Your business may not survive. And, the reason why this becomes pretty complex is because of what's in orange there. You can't always attribute the actor. You don't know who it is. You might, if you've got really good intelligence and you got enough data there, but you're not always going to be able to do that. If you haven't navigated through OPAC, it's going to be a challenge. And then if you're small, you're already affording the cost of an incident, possibly paying the ransomware. And now our government is fining you at the same time. So it becomes, just a trickle effect of damage. So, what they recommend is implementing a risk-based compliance program. What that means is decide if it's worth the risk of setting aside money to pay OFAC. Okay, that's really what that means. And account for that payment. If you're state, local, federal, you probably shouldn't be paying this most times anyway. I think you probably have rules that if you look, they're not going to want you to pay those ransomware payments. And I know small businesses, sometimes they don't feel there's any other way to get their data back than to do that. And that's why we've recommended all the other, approaches in here. If you do have to go up there, the way you can do it, we try to just make this simple in the writing is, you can go up and look When you do that, you're gonna want to look into what they call the Cyber 2 program, and I've got links on this stuff, so don't stress it. And that will give you an idea of how to look at stuff. And then, make sure your plans include calling law enforcement if you're going to pay, notifying OFAC at some level. I know your lawyers may try to guide you one way or another. Just understand if you're not going to call, you're probably going to pay more. So they do encourage you to call, beforehand and do that. And kind of they'll be a little bit less likely to hit you with such a fee when you do that. And we sent several phone calls talking to them and trying to understand how all this worked. And, they're more there to talk about critical infrastructure and when it disrupts critical infrastructure. And, a lot of the numbers you have on the site, you have to make sure you know exactly how to report it. And we go through that in the dark reading article, because, you have to know that even though you're talking to one entity to try to get guidance, it may not be the right entity to report the ransomware issue. So, we document all that in the article for you. And just to kind of leave you with a couple of items, and we'll open it up for questions here. These are some of the key items you can find at Awake. So we've got the dark reading article on the OFAC that's out there, that's by myself and one of my key incident responders, Kevin Romano, who's just a stellar resource we picked up. And then you got a couple of different white papers. Some of the things that are really kind of interesting, if you look at that Reveal ransomware paper, that was actually done by our threat research group, but it goes to a level of we're starting to TLS fingerprint the actor's C2, and even if they change things, we pick up their TLS fingerprint on the network. You think about IOCs, Suricata rules; those are all kind of static. You're kind of chasing it, but if you can TLS fingerprint their infrastructure, it becomes a lot harder for them to know that, and also avoid getting detected at some levels. And then, we've got a couple of different, things that we do around the zero login and Kerberosing at the network level. So just some good resources for you to follow up with. And as Rudy said, the Maze paper is into some similar topics. This kind of goes a little bit different depth in the AD, but you can see there's quite a bit we can do to disrupt these attacks if we're in with the network equipment, looking at things. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Rudy, for any questions.
Yep. Thanks, Jason. And, for those of you who have not been paying attention to the chat, I've posted a lot of the links that Jason talked about in the chat section, so you can find them there. Jason, thanks as always for those insights and firsthand experience. There's a bunch of comments as well that appreciated your kind of from the trenches, experience and sharing. We have a few questions that came through. I'm not sure we'll get through all of them, but please keep them coming, and we'll definitely respond offline as well if needed. But Jason, I'll just go in, I guess, no particular order. First question, it's kind of I guess a little bit of a basic one, right? What are the top 3 things you would do if you're alerted to ransomware in your environment? So if you're the person in the SOC and you find out, what's the first, second, and third thing you would recommend people think about?
Yeah, I'm gonna throw a loop in this. If you're asking yourself that and you don't at least have some level of plan, you're probably in trouble at some point. You really needed to get ahead of it and sort of be prepared. But, if you don't have a plan and you don't know how to essentially do that, again, if it's a system and it's been hit, you need to stop it from hitting everything else. So you really do need to, one, probably pull it offline immediately. And I would, especially if you don't have a plan, you don't have the expertise, I would reach out immediately and get somebody with stronger advice that can come in and start to walk you through the rest of it. So again, pull it off, call somebody, and then they're going to guide you as the third step. They're going to walk you through what you need to do. It may not be an issue anymore. They may have told you you've done a great job, but again, you need to figure out root cause on that as part of that third step. How did it actually get in? What happened? Was it phishing? Was it an RDP? Because if you don't close that exposure, you're likely going to have somebody else hit right after. What you want to do is immediately contain it as fast as possible.
Excellent. So next question's a slightly different one. Are you seeing a trend towards ransomware also targeting cloud or SaaS-based resources? Any tips or suggestions to protect those kinds of assets?
You are seeing a shifting. I think there's still a lot of it is on the ground, but you are seeing shifts into the SaaS infrastructure, and I think you'll continue to see the movement in the cloud. You see security vendors investing to move into the cloud and SaaS for protections too. But I think some of the key things that we go through, and it's great you asked that because I didn't really cover these, and this is a lot of times a huge mistake on a lot of the IR remediation vendors I've seen, and we try to make sure we're covering this, but they'll send you a lot of stuff on how to lock up AD and do all this stuff just as I talked about, but what about your CloudTrail logs? Are those in place? Again, logging becomes a fundamental component. So if you think about it, endpoint logging network. So, in the cloud, some things can be protected with endpoint, some things can't. Well, something like AWS, are you turning on all the CloudTrail logging and are you monitoring that? So that looks the logging side. And then for those on the network, you can do things like VPC taps and you can watch the network traffic. So again, it's different, but it's the same three components that sort of address the environment. And, you want to make sure you're hybriding that too, because a lot of times the cloud will talk back to the core infrastructure. So you need to have visibility across them. So again, you're going to have trust sometimes between the cloud and on-prem. So you got to make sure not only are you addressing just the cloud, you got to address the hybrid between the two organizations at the same time. Again, looking at endpoint, network, and logging as the three main components.
Excellent. So maybe one more question we might have time for. So Jason, you talked about OFAC. Are you also familiar with the Office of Cybersecurity and Critical Infrastructure Protection? What is your experience with this organization been, or maybe the experience that some of your clients have had?
Yeah, and this is going to apply a lot to the financial infrastructure. In many cases, there are other areas of critical infrastructure. So I don't want to maybe say it's isolated to finance, but that was actually one of the first numbers we were going through and just wanted to see if we understood the changes of it. And, this is sort of what I was trying to explain about being able to know which organization you're talking to at OFAC. So when you call the critical infrastructure group, they're going to help assess and identify if your attack deals with critical infrastructure, okay, the energy grid, the finance system. And then they're going to pull together different parties and sort of help coordinate communications through the right players between them and help you navigate to who needs to be involved to help essentially manage a critical infrastructure component. With that said, they're not the group that you're essentially reporting the ransomware to. And even though you report it to them, they are going to report to the other group, but that's not considered to be your obligation. They're not fulfilling your obligation. You actually need to contact the main OFAC number and report it to outside of the critical infrastructure group. And if you don't, the critical infrastructure group is going to know about it, tell the main OFAC group, and then they're going to know you didn't contact them too. So you just need to understand that relationship there. And the critical infrastructure is going to give you the right resources to bring in all the different federal government components, the key banking people in the banking problem, and going to pull all the different departments of the government and the financial groups together to deal with that. And then that's where most of my stuff is. But energy has the same thing. You're going to pull all the components of the energy industry that are required, as well as the government offices, and they kind of help those groups communicate with each other and what they should and shouldn't communicate with each other to address the problem.
And so it sounds like in addition to the complexity of remediation and dealing with encryption, et cetera, you've got a bunch of policy and government relation stuff also involved. Cool. Jason, we're totally out of time. And folks, if you didn't get to your question, we'll follow up offline. Definitely feel free to reach out to us as well. I want to thank Jason and his team again for all their great work in the field, but also on this webinar. Thanks everyone for attending. If you'd like to share or view the recording, these are available on demand within a few hours. So you can go to our website in the webinar section and find it there. You could also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter for more of our insights. We look forward to seeing you at the next Awake Security webinar, and visit us at awakesecurity.com. Thank you, everyone.